Welcome to the Rancher's Voice, presented by the Montana Stockgrowers Association. I'm Jay Bodner, MSGA's Executive Vice President.
And I'm Raylee Honeycutt, Director of Natural Resources. Join us for conversations surrounding policy, the legislature, and issues that matter most to ranching families in Montana. Welcome to the Rancher's Voice. Today we will be sharing a few highlights from the 67th Legislature wrap-up, as well as a great interview from our Attorney General, Austin Knudsen. I'm Raylee Honeycutt, and as you'll notice, I am flying solo today as Jay is out at meetings. So let's jump in. For those of you listening, also a friendly reminder to subscribe to the Rancher's Voice, follow us on social, like, share, and comment on each episode, and make sure to send your questions to Kenny, Keni, at mtbeef.org. So the wrap of the 67th Legislature was last Thursday, and the sine die was called on Thursday, and really that is the completion, and Helena kind of heads back to normal. So Jay and I will be doing a complete review of all of the legislative bills that we worked on this past session in next week's episode, but just wanted to highlight as bills are wrapping up and getting enrolled and heading to the governor, again, our three key pieces that we worked on behalf of our members for. The first one was the veterinary diagnostic lab. We're sitting very well with that, both having funds allocated in House Bill 14 as well as House Bill 632. As we've mentioned before, that funding has some contingency language, so depending on how the American Rescue Plan parameters roll out, it may be spent from ARPA funds, or it may be coming out of House Bill 14, but very exciting that the veterinary diagnostic lab is funded and will be moving forward. Also, House Bill 554, our National Heritage Area bill, has passed the legislature and it is on its way to the governor's office, as well as House Bill 660, which is the bill that MSGA led in partnership with Representative Josh Kazmaier to increase funding for the Made in Montana program. That bill also passed the legislature and is in the process of heading to the governor's office. Last week, we also had the opportunity to join the governor and Representative Kazmaier for the signing of House Bill 302. House Bill 302 is the bill that will, it is now law that will require county approval of any relocation of wild bison into a county. And this week, we are headed to Fort Benton to again join the governor and Representative Kazmaier for the signing of House Bill 303, which is the business equipment tax bill. Very excited, kind of at the end of session, the bill was amended to increase that exemption from $200,000, which was the original language in the bill, to $300,000. So many of you out there will feel the benefits of that bill, as you will now have a limit of $300,000 in exemptions for your business equipment taxes. So that's a quick wrap up of what happened last week at the legislature as they kind of ended and headed out of town. Like I said, check out next week's episode as we hit all of the bills that we've been working on this past session and kind of give you a status of where they ended and which have become law. And with that, we're going to head over to our interview. I've had the opportunity to know Attorney General Austin Knudsen for many years, and Jay and I had the opportunity to sit down with him and do a really great deep dive into some of the issues that he's working on now that he is in the Attorney General's office. So with that, please help me welcome Austin Knudsen.
I'd like to welcome everybody, and with us today we have Attorney General Austin Knudsen. And Austin, I know that a lot of our listeners are really familiar with you and your time in the legislature, but for those that may have not had that opportunity to meet you yet, maybe you can just share a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Jay and Raylee. Good to see you. I'm a farm and ranch kid from northeastern Montana. I grew up in Roosevelt County, our family farm and ranch. I'm, fourth, fifth, whatever generation I am on the family place, but grew up raising registered Angus cattle. My grandfather started that back in the 50s, and we stuck with it. And that's what I grew up doing, riding horse, usually for work and not for fun. But also farmed, didn't just ranch, we farmed too, grew a lot of spring wheat, put up a lot of hay. So yeah, that was my life for about the first 20 odd years of my life. Kept going with that till I was in college, and then just kind of on a whim went to law school. I only applied to University of Montana because I said if I wasn't going to get into Montana, I wasn't going to go. And I got in. So ended up getting my law degree in 2008 from the University of Montana. Went back home. I practiced law in my home area. I was with a small farm and ranch, small town-based law firm in Plentywood for about 5 years. Represented a lot of farmers and ranchers, a lot of my neighbors. And then I ended up going off on my own, opened my own law firm in 2013. Kind of the same thing. Did a lot of natural resources stuff, a lot of oil and gas stuff for farmers and ranchers, a lot of estate planning, just kind of your general soup to nuts law firm in little small town Montana. And then, as you guys probably know, I served a few sessions in the Montana Legislature. I served in the State House from 2011 until I termed out in 2018, where I served 2 sessions as the Speaker of the House. And then probably about the only other thing fit for print is that I was the Roosevelt County Attorney there for a couple of years. So got some criminal prosecution under my belt from 2018 until 2020, right before I got elected to my current job. So.
Well, great. And I know just from our perspective, from kind of the ranching community, it's really nice to have somebody in your position that has that kind of background, that understands ranching and farming and agriculture and really those things that impact us. So we're glad that you're successful in your position, and it'll be wonderful working with you.
I appreciate that.
Well, let's dive into the fun stuff and talk a little bit about legislation and some legal cases that we just had a decision on. So the state of Montana just won a really important case surrounding legislation from the 2019 session and House Bill 286. And from our standpoint, this win is a pretty significant victory for water rights holders. So can you walk us and our listeners through that case and the significance of it from a state standpoint?
Yeah, no, this is a very important piece of legislation and a very important court case. And this goes clear back to when I was still serving the legislature, but it really boils down to the DNRC under the previous administration was attempting to grab water rights. There's no better way of saying that. This arose when, if you as a private landowner maybe leased a state section that abutted your property, and let's say you had a groundwater right and a well on your side of the fence, and you ran a pipe across the fence to water your cattle on the DNRC section, on the state land section. The previous administration in DNRC claimed that was now their water right, which a lot of us thought was pretty outrageous. So it took till the 2019 session of the legislature for the legislature to pass House Bill 286, basically saying DNRC couldn't do that. Good piece of legislation. It got to Governor Bullock's desk. He let it become law. He didn't sign it, but he did let it go into law, which was good. That was immediately challenged by a number of, I guess, concerned people, claiming that that was somehow a diminution of the state's trust value on their lands. As your listeners may or may not know, I sit on the land board, and as a land board member now, we have an obligation to maximize the dollar value gotten off trust lands. And that's basically what these plaintiffs were arguing, that by passing this legislation, the legislature was devaluing state trust land, which was frankly a silly argument. And so I inherited the case when I took office. It's obviously one that we were watching very carefully. We had my Department of Justice lawyers arguing the case. And frankly, just recently here, we got a very good ruling from Judge McMahon here in Lewis and Clark County, who was not always the friendliest, but we did get a very good, very well-reasoned ruling from him. He basically said that they have not proven a damage yet. In order to have a civil case in Montana, and in any civil case, you have to have damages. Basically, what the judge ruled is that the case was not ripe, which means you can't come in and claim, well, we're going to be hurt by this, therefore, judge, you should do something. The case has to be ripe. You actually have to have suffered some sort of a financial harm. And in this case, the plaintiffs just couldn't prove that. They could not prove that House Bill 286 damaged or devalued state lands in any way. So we've won at this point. Don't know if we're going to see an appeal. I wouldn't be surprised if we did, but we did get a very, very good, very reasoned ruling from Judge McMahon here in Lewis and Clark County. So a good case.
Yeah, we would agree 100% that was a good case. And certainly it's nice to have those kind of convincing wins. I know just for, some of our listeners out there, when your office does kind of look at some of these cases and what to get involved in, what's the process that you go through before you kind of make that decision?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's new for us, frankly. We've only been here 5 months now. We're still kind of trying to find our sea legs here. We've inherited a lot of cases that were already ongoing when we took over the administration of the Department of Justice. For me, it really comes down to our Montanans' rights being violated here. So that's kind of the first and foremost thing for me. Is it something I'm really passionate about? There's a handful of issues that really get me riled up and that we're going to be very aggressive about, whether it's farming and ranching stuff, private property. That's a very important one to me. The Second Amendment, those sorts of things, those are going to get a really close eye from me early on. But I've got people in here helping me. I've got staff attorneys that have been here for a lot of years. I've got some really smart solicitors that I brought in here on the federal stuff. Where the Constitution, I think, has to take front seat when we're looking at what kind of cases to get involved in. And when we can see a blatant violation of Montanans' constitutional rights, you can pretty well rest assured we're going to jump in there. There have been some instances already, where we've got agencies that get sued. So, I mean, most of the state agencies, they answer to the governor. A lot of those state agencies have their own in-house counsel. They can choose to defend themselves, or they can come over to my shop and ask for our help, which happens a lot. So there is some communication back and forth between some of the other agencies and our office when we're having these discussions. That's kind of how it's worked so far. But I think 30,000 feet, when the Constitution is very blatantly being violated, we're going to get involved.
Thanks.
So let's talk a little bit more about some of the other cases that you have been getting involved with. You kind of mentioned your key pillars of how you test and what your priorities may be, but what are some other issues that you may highlight for us that may be impacting the ranching community or livestock owners?
Sure. Well, I can think of a couple right off the top of my head. Proposition 12 that came out of California. That was a legislative we would call it a legislative referendum here in Montana. I guess I don't know what they call them in California, a proposition. But it went to the voters in California, and they voted some fairly stringent, humane society type rules on dealing with livestock. And that's fine if they want to do that within the state of California. The problem is they purport to reach across state lines and mandate other states that want to do business with California have to follow those same really egregious animal rights kind of standards, I guess, for lack of a better term. But they're just crazy. I mean, these come straight from the Humane Society. They obviously come from people with no familiarity with farming and ranching, no familiarity with animal husbandry. Of course, no ranchers in Montana want to be inhumane to their animals. That's an asinine premise to even start with. That's Montana ranchers' livelihoods, and of course, we take great care of our animals. But when you've got people in California who literally think that chocolate milk comes from brown cows, trying to tell us in Montana how to raise our livestock, we've got a problem with that. So we jumped in that lawsuit, got behind that one. I think that was the right thing to do. That's an easy one that really affects your constituency. You know, another one that might not be directly related, but I think it does relate in some aspects. We've taken the lead on the Keystone XL fight. That was a huge project that was going to go through 6 counties in eastern Montana, over where I'm from. Some of the most sparsely populated, frankly, most poverty-stricken counties in the country, not just in Montana. These are poor counties from a financial standpoint. These county commissions and county governments don't get a lot of tax dollars. There's not a lot of tax base in those counties. That Keystone pipeline was set to become the #1 property taxpayer in almost all of those counties, 5 out of the 6 of them in Montana. You know, some of those counties were looking at 117% increase in their property tax base just from that project alone. That means lower property taxes for farmers and ranchers in those counties. To me, that's a no-brainer. That's a huge project that not just brings property tax relief, it brings jobs. People are trying to figure out how to stay on the farm, how to stay on the ranch. How do we get our kids to stay in these communities in eastern Montana that, you know, frankly, are drying up? And I say that because I'm from out there. I had to go find a job. I had to go to law school in order to stay on the family place. I get it. This was a project that was going to bring over 4,000 new jobs just in the pipeline, let alone lineman jobs putting up power lines and building power plants and substations to service that pipeline in the project. So when President Biden canceled that on literally his first day in office, we stepped up, we took the lead. I got 21 other states behind us, but we are leading that lawsuit. We've sued the Biden administration over that decision. So that's one I think that really affects ranching communities in Montana.
Yeah, and that certainly is one that's followed very closely, I think, by in the entire state, certainly from, you know, the ranching and farming communities also. So just kind of switching gears a bit, about a month ago, you hosted Taiwan's Director General Daniel Chin and Vice Consul Ting Cheng for some trade opportunities in Montana and really even looking at reopening our trade office. So maybe you can share a little bit about your background and experience with Taiwan and how we see that potentially moving forward.
Oh, I'm happy to. I consider learning about the country of Taiwan maybe one of the most significant things I've done in my legislative career. I suspect a lot of people in Montana probably don't know much about Taiwan and just assume it's a Chinese country. It's very interesting, the history of Taiwan. Taiwan is a fully functioning democracy. It's an island nation that lies less than 100 miles off the coast of China. China claims it, very constantly under threat of violence, frankly. The communist Chinese government does not recognize the democratic government of Taiwan. They are constantly threatening to annihilate Taiwan. They are constantly threatening to invade Taiwan. The only reason they don't is because we're there, Americans. Taiwan is a small nation. They're a small volcanic island with very little agriculture. They basically have to import all of their food for their millions of residents, which gets us to Montana agriculture. Taiwan takes its trade relations with the US and with specific states very, very seriously because they recognize they are fully dependent on US agriculture to feed themselves. Right now, Taiwan is Montana's #5 export partner. They buy that much Montana beef and grain. Those are the 2 main commodities we ship to them. They want to do more. They fully want to engage the Montana agriculture markets. They want more high quality Montana beef. They want more high quality Montana cereal grain. And to do that, the discussion I had with the Director General, was the possibility of reopening our Montana trade office in Taiwan. We had it decades ago. Governor Schweitzer, under his administration, axed that office and closed it. I think that was a bad move. That was very short-sighted. That sent a message to the Taiwanese people that we weren't necessarily going to be that friendly to them anymore, and they were very concerned about that. So it's been really a fun thing for me to get to know the nation, know the people. They love Americans. They love American products. They love all things American. But what they really love is Western U.S. beef. And I think this is a huge opportunity for us, for the stock growers, for Montana farmers and ranchers, to expand into some really fertile territory for an export market here. The Taiwanese, it doesn't get much better for them than a Western style cooked steak. That's about as high living as you get in Taiwan, and they want more of it. I think Montana's in a great place to give it to them.
And we would agree, and definitely enjoyed our conversations with that delegation, as well as we kind of talked about Montana beef and served them some Montana beef as well when we were able to host them for a lunch. So I wanted to hop back to your mention of the land board, and you currently serve on that. And that land board is, everybody is new on that except for the superintendent of OPI. She kind of carried over. But as a new group, you've had a couple meetings under your belt now and had some time to kind of get your bearings. So talk to us a little bit about what you as a board kind of hope to accomplish moving forward, and any specifics you think are important for our listeners to know as they listen in on meetings, or what they should pay special attention to.
Sure. Well, we haven't had a whole lot of fireworks yet on the land board, which is good because a few of us are still getting our sea legs. But basically, the land board is tasked with being the trustees of all the state-owned land in Montana, and whether those lands are being leased for farming and ranching activities, whether they're being leased for a timber sale, whether they're being leased for oil and gas development. The land board has an obligation, a fiduciary obligation, to maximize the value of those state lands, because those state lands really are how we fund our schools in Montana. All the money that comes off state lands go right into K through 12 education, whether it's a coal lease, an oil and gas lease, or a grazing lease. That money goes right into your schools. So it really is important, I think, to everyone on this land board that we maximize the value of those state trust lands. Now, the flip side of that is I'm excited because we've now got full Republican control of the land board. I think we're all going to be fairly unified. This is going to be a land board that I think is going to be very, very pro-leasing. We're going to be very pro-development, whether that's natural resource development or whether that's agricultural development, frankly. I'm excited to be a member of the land board who's actually got some background in farming and ranching, who grew up in that industry, who knows a little bit about it. To my understanding, I don't think probably anybody else in the land board grew up doing that or has a whole lot of background in agriculture. But I'm looking forward to being that guy. I'm also looking forward to being the lawyer on the land board who's represented a lot of farmers and ranchers in my previous career as a small town lawyer. I mean, that was my bread and butter. I worked for my neighbors. I worked for farmers and ranchers on oil and gas leases and on grazing leases, farm and ranch leases. These are things I'm very familiar with. I know what an oil and gas lease should look like. I know what should be in it. I know what shouldn't be in it. I know what protections need to be in it for the land. Same thing with a grazing lease or a farming lease. That's stuff I know. It's stuff I'm familiar with, and I'm really looking forward to bringing that knowledge to the land board. We haven't dealt with a lot of that stuff too much. We've had some easements. We've had a few land banking parcels, that were landlocked, and maybe a ranching outfit who had a landlocked chunk of state land in the middle of them that wanted to bank that for the state, purchase that from the state. The state can buy something else somewhere else. To me, that just makes good sense. I think that's us being good stewards of state property and ensuring that we've got access. We have to have access to the state lands. We don't want people to not be able to get to state lands. But in those kind of situations, when we can swap that piece of land and maybe get something else that gets us some hunting opportunities or some outdoor recreation opportunities, I mean, to me, that's just smart business and being a good steward of state land.
Yeah, that is a program certainly we've supported, and it does really make more sense. It's better to have that management under one entity, and if the state can make a little more money by increasing their access and availability, certainly it works on the state's benefit also.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up a little, thought maybe you could just share a little bit about your vision or priorities that you will be focusing on as the Attorney General.
Sure. Well, I've made no bones about it. I mean, we're running a very aggressive, conservative law office here in the Department of Justice, and that's really how we see it. We are the state's law office, and we're being aggressive. I've worn that on my sleeve through my campaign and throughout my career, and that's how we're going to run things over here. So, kind of as I said earlier, when we're seeing any kind of constitutional violations or places where we see Montanans' constitutional rights being infringed on, we are going to get in that fight. Whether we have to join that fight or whether we have to make that fight, we're going to be doing so. I'm really big on the Second Amendment. I'm openly a gun nut. I'm a shooter. I'm a collector. I'm a reloader. I'm a hunter. If it goes bang, I'm really into it. And that's one issue where I'm really very wary, especially of the Biden administration and the way he's been talking about some of these executive orders, some of the actions he's pushing Congress to take. We're going to be on the front line in that fight if and when they come, because I do think they are coming. So that's just one area, Second Amendment, but it doesn't matter if it's Second Amendment or if it's private property rights, if it's the First Amendment, your freedom of association, government overreach, when you're talking about some of these mandates, those are fights that we are going to step up. We're going to be bold. We're going to be aggressive in this office. And I guess that's probably the thought I would leave with your listeners and your membership, that you've got an aggressive young Attorney General with a background in farming and ranching, and I hope that puts your viewership at ease.
Well, I think it certainly does, and like I mentioned earlier, it is very nice and comforting to know that somebody with your background in ag and ranching and farming and leading the organization and leading the agency. So I know you have a busy schedule, but we very much do appreciate you taking some time to visit with us and talking a little bit about the Attorney General's office and the future of that. So thank you once again very much for joining us.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Glad to do it.
Well, thank you again to Attorney General Austin Knudsen for joining us. As you heard, he has a lot of great things going on from his office and is a great ally for the agriculture industry and ranching, which is great to have in that office. And we look forward to working and continuing to work with him moving forward. So again, thank you for listening. Remember to subscribe to The Rancher's Voice, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, and make sure to like, share, and comment on each episode. With that, we hope you have a great week and we will talk to you later. Bye.